Hey you! Yes, you, watching this video. Do you want to own a piece of Scribbler? Only not a lock of hair or blood or flesh or anything else that will get you in trouble with the law? Well, now you can, with t-shirts, hoodies, tote bags and mugs featuring Obab Scribbler at her Teespring store. You know you want to. I shall now stop talking in third person and send you on to the video. Be lovely to each other and enjoy the show.
Ponytails. Read by Scribbler.
I don't have scary nightmares. At least, I haven't since I was just a kid. My nightmares are depressing. Not traumatic either. Not even tragic. Just depressing. They usually deal with some uncomfortable and very believable thing happening to me that affects the course of my everyday life within the dream. Maybe a close family member dies. I'm just about the only young one left, so it's bound to happen very soon. Maybe I drop out of college. For no other reason than that I can't take the pressure. Something I've given serious thought to on bad days. Maybe I even find myself working in a cubicle in some faceless company, which is exactly where I'll end up if I'm not careful. On their own, of course. I wouldn't say these things would make for a nightmare. It's what happens next, though, that really sticks with me. I learned to live with it. No matter how far my quality of life has fallen, a slight decline, or an exhilarating drop off the edge of a cliff, the dream me keeps on keeping on, living life one day at a time with his burden however much heavier. When I eventually wake up, even if I don't entirely remember the dream, I never forget that feeling. Despite the fact that whatever event that sets one of these dreams in motion never actually happened, it's like my subconscious has had an entire fictional month to getting used to being just a bit sadder, even though my conscious mind doesn't understand why.
A warm sound rings out, that of a pencil being wrapped on a pad of paper.
I imagine,
Comes a motherly voice.
that must be very frustrating for you.
I don't think that's the word I'd use.
The young man sits up a bit straighter in his cushy chair, the leather squeaking as it stretches.
I'm all but used to it at this point. I'd sooner call it just another thing on the pile.
You've used that phrase before.
Says the bespectacled woman sitting across from him.
This pile. You sound very resigned to it. Is it really so insurmountable?
The young man glances off to the side.
I don't know. It feels that way, most of the time.
The woman looks to the clock on the table next to her and frowns.
Paul, I'm sorry to say that our session is almost up. I have something I'd like you to try, though. Pick 3 things from this pile of yours. 3 things you might normally lay back and accept, and conquer them before our session on Thursday. Will you do this?
Paul's mouth tightens.
I can try, I guess.
Paul and his therapist stand, shake hands, and exchange goodbyes. He leaves her office and walks out to his car, the sun shining down overhead. Paul shuts off his headlights, unclicks his seatbelt, and squirms to get at his pants pocket. Phone in hand, he dials up one Frank Matthews and leans his seat back a bit. A blank expression on his face, he stares out at the few lit windows suspended up in the darkness, listening to the ringing at his ear.
Hey, kiddo.
Comes a tired voice.
Hey, Dad. Done for the day. Ready to go.
We'll be in just a few.
Frank's tone is somewhat rushed.
Why don't you come on up? I could use your help bringing a few things down anyway.
'Kay, See you in a sec.
Paul pockets his phone and keys, popping open the door of his aging sedan and setting foot on the parking lot before locking up. The soft clap of rubber on tar and the song of a single distant bird are all that stir the night air as he makes his way to the office building's entrance. Inside, walls of white with flecks of shadowed texture meet floors carpeted in brownish grey. Paul shivers, tucking his hands more firmly into his hoodie's pockets. He nods to a receptionist seated past a nearby white enamelled kiosk. She gives a friendly wave back, before heading down the hall to the elevators. 4 dings later, Paul steps out into an identical hallway. Beyond is a large room that takes up the majority of the floor, packed neatly wall to wall with interconnected cubicles of a mottled grey. 5 rows of cubicles down and 3 deep, Paul comes to the first occupied one that he's yet passed.
Hey, Paul.
Frank Matthews, a large man with somewhat greyed and receding hair, looks up from a desk cluttered with papers and boxes. He pockets a pen he was holding and starts packing the papers up. Paul sighs.
Dad, it's late enough already. You really want to stay up with all that tonight?
Frank shoots Paul a frown.
Not like I've got much of a choice, kiddo. Now come on.
Papers secured, he hands a box to Paul and stacks up the 2 remaining for himself, hefting them after shutting his desk light off. The pair make their way to the elevator and step inside the opening doors. Frank lifts a leg up to balance his boxes as he reaches for the ground floor button.
You know, the job's not really as bad as all this,
he says, a serious look on his face as he turns back to Paul.
Summer's coming up, and you know I could talk to my supervisor about an internship.
How many times have I said no, man?
Kiddo, you have to do something.
Frank's mouth dips down into a frown once more.
I haven't exactly seen you making much of an effort to find an alternative.
Paul stays silent, not meeting his father's eyes. The elevator doors open up to the ground floor. Frank looks out, then back to Paul.
Look, I'll just talk to Walter about it, alright? It's not a guarantee or anything, kiddo. And it's not permanent either way.
Frank steps out without waiting for any sort of answer, and Paul follows soon after. A blaring noise rings out. Paul immediately works himself over to his bedside table and grabs his phone in the dark. His thumb is just about to hit the off button, but stops abruptly. He lays there for a few moments, staring at the screen and listening to the noise, mouth set in a line. Paul sits up and gets out from under his covers, turning off his phone's alarm only after he's no longer in contact with his bed.
1.
With eyes closed for most of the trip, Paul retrieves an outfit set out on a nearby chair and heads through the open door to the adjacent bathroom. Combing his wet hair, brushing his teeth, Paul's eyes skirt the edges of the mirror. He spits, rinses, spits, mouthwash now, rinsing again, meets his own eyes for a second, and then he's heading back into his room. A moment gone, and Paul has the curtains open, light shining in on a mess of clothes, bottles, dust, dirt. He goes and checks his phone again, almost an hour until the next alarm. He turns this way and that before he spots a trash can and a hamper half buried. He walks over and begins to dig them out.
2.
Day and night and day, and it's Wednesday evening now. Paul lies on his bed, staring at the ceiling. On a desk in the corner sits a notebook, open. A problem set has been copied down, and next to it on the page is a meticulously drawn, stylized 3, but an X in fresher ink obscures it. Paul reaches for his MP3 player on the nightstand, but his hand pauses and changes course, reaching instead for a game controller, but pauses again. His hand comes slowly back to his side, and his eyes return to the ceiling. There's a fleck of mold directly overhead. White ceiling, even coating, not blindingly pure, but not hideously yellowed. And a blemish of blackness right above Paul's head, murky, but interwoven with the white. Paul watches the spot, and as he watches, the spot watches back. Wavering, waving, floating and flowing, growing.
And it swallowed me. Or at least that's what it felt like. Reached down and sucked me in. It wasn't scary though. It didn't feel different. Well, I mean, what do I mean? It just felt the same. But then I'm feeling myself wake up. And nothing has felt the same since. I'm noticing sounds coming from all around me. In me too. Like, in my head. They're bouncing through my skull like I'm surrounded on all sides by some pretty powerful speakers. But the weird thing is that the sounds themselves aren't actually all that loud. If the feeling of waking to that wasn't so odd, I might call them pleasant. I finally get around to opening my eyes, but when I do, I see nothing but a hideous shade of blue. Like, it's so outright saturated that it feels like my eyes are going to melt if I look at it for too long. Something happens to the sounds when I open my eyes, though they start sounding familiar. It's a little tune. Just for a second, notes getting progressively higher in pitch. Sort of sounds like, well, waking up in music form. If waking up were some idealized happy thing. I'm feeling a little disturbed, but I sit up. All around me, there's grass, with some patches of wildflowers interspersed. It's looking like I'm in the valley of a few hills that I'm seeing around myself. The grass, though, and the flowers, they're just like the sky was. Color all exaggerated, only even worse. Because now there's so many more colors. It looks incredibly unnatural, and my stomach is starting to disagree with it. Don't really know what I thought about it all, actually. I think I passed it off like there was something wrong with me. With my eyes or my head or something. But anyway, I'm standing now, and before I know it, I'm walking. Nothing to gain from just sitting there, right? And I can't look at the flowers anymore anyway. The valley goes on a while, or maybe I'm just hitting more and more hills. I decide to get to the top of one. It's tall, but not too steep. Picturesque, really. Just the thing I'd paint if someone told me to paint a hill, and if they only gave me some obnoxious neon green to paint it with. There's a breeze up at the top, or at least I think. Something's off about it. I can hear it whistling past me, but I don't know. Never mind it. Maybe there isn't one. As far as the sights go, there's a lot more greens and blues. Miles and miles of them. Some greens off to the side are darker, a bit more bearable, and imply a forest. Even if all the trees I can make out don't look much like a real tree might. I turn around and things start to pick up. The hills end, and I can see a town past a lot of green and brown and a big wad of red. More trees and a barn. Not a second thought, and I'm on my way there. The music in my head sounding like walking, or purpose, I guess. The color is still going strong, so at this point I'm starting to squint my eyes a lot. When I get in range, I see that they're apple trees. The spots of red here and there in their leaves so overwhelming that the color almost seems to bleed over into everything else. second I notice that, the smell hits me. This heavy perfume of a thing. My eyes are starting to water from it all. Nothing for it though, so I keep going. Last thing on my mind is the time, with all this stuff overloading me, so I could have been walking for minutes or hours, or meters, or miles. It's all just a literal blur. But then it all sort of snaps back, right as I hear a voice say,
Howdy?
I clear my vision, and there's a weird girl in front of me. That's exactly what my brain said to me, weird girl. But my eyes were telling a different story. Standing on 4 legs that didn't end in feet or paws or hooves, that just cut off on round stubs. This girl wasn't human. Wasn't anything remotely resembling a human, apart from her long hair and this hat she had on. But I couldn't bring myself to really mind. It's like she fit right in with everything else, somehow. Like I was probably the one out of place. She raises one of her legs and waves it in front of me.
Can you talk?
She says, something like a frown on her animal face.
What's a thing like you doing in my orchard?
A feeling like waking up from a dream hits me, funnily enough. Sorry, I say, and it's there that I realize how much I was moving on autopilot before. I think I was just trying to get to the town.
Ponyville?
She asks. And now that she mentions it, I figure that she looks more like a pony than anything else, outside of a pair of distractingly huge eyes. If you say so. She puts a stub hoof up to her chin and says,
I guess I could take a break a bit earlier and show you all the way. Sweet Apple Acres can be mighty easy to get lost in for a first-timer.
She puts the same limb forward towards me.
I'm Applejack. Pleased to make your acquaintance.
Paul, I say. I take her stub in my hand and shake it. Weirdly, it feels nothing at all like it looks. It actually is hardened like a hoof. And further up, I feel short, soft hair instead of skin. Still though, there's one part of me that... I don't know. It felt like even what I was feeling wasn't right. Just like what I'd been seeing hadn't been. I make to pull my hand back, but before I can react, Applejack grips my wrist somehow, in her ankle maybe, and moves my hand to a spot in the air, palm up.
On the house,
she says, putting her hoof bottom up in another spot of the air. She lifts one of her back hooves up, and quick as lightning, strikes a tree trunk next to herself. I hear a rustling in the leaves above, and an apple apiece falls right into our grasps. It's even worse up close. Almost everything in my sight is being eaten into by the red dripping outward from the apple. I hear a crisp, wet crunch, and I look up to see Applejack starting in on hers. And I decide to just go for it. That was a bad idea. It tastes indescribable, but not in any positive way. It's as though my brain is trying desperately to tell me that what I'm tasting is the juiciest, most taste bud overloadingly delicious fruit I've ever had the honor of stuffing in my unworthy mouth. But my taste buds themselves are all but screaming at me that I'm not tasting anything at all. Or maybe that I'm not tasting anything that they have reverence for. A taste I'm not capable of understanding. It's that same part of me that didn't understand Applejack's hoof or the breeze on the hill. But the feeling is coming through clear and sharp with the apple. I hear Applejack say,
fruit ain't your thing?
She's got an eyebrow raised high.
You ain't a carnivore, are you?
No. It's just a bit different from the apples that I'm used to. She turns and starts to walk through the trees.
Different how?
She asks, with a touch of disappointment, or maybe even offense. I follow, saying, it wasn't bad. I have trouble putting the feeling into words. It's just not what I'm used to.
Fair enough.
Applejack walks steadily on. The music, which I only now realized had dimmed the background for the conversation, is back in force. Progress, with a steady rhythm and light, jaunty sounds. Every part of the orchard we come to looks the same as every part before. and I feel grateful that Applejack is there to guide me through it. Soon enough, we come to a dirt path, turning onto it.
So, what's your business in Ponyville? And for that matter, where are you coming from? I ain't heard of your sort in Equestria before.
I stay silent for a few moments, thinking, and I find I can't actually come up with an answer. It's all sort of fuzzy. I woke up in those hills outside of your orchard, saw the town, and I guess it seemed better than staying put. I don't really remember anything before that. I wonder if I would have realized if I was dreaming if I'd thought about it more. I could have ended it all right then and there. I'm happy I didn't. Ponyville is odd. Most buildings are unassuming and look to be made of wood and thatch in fairly modern styles. But other buildings we pass are styled as carousels, or built into trees, or, like the one we're heading towards, look to be made out of gingerbread and frosting. Applejack said that, since I didn't have anything in mind for what I was going to do in Ponyville, she'd just take me to where she'd planned on having her break. As we go through the town, I get the impression that she's being very nonchalant about me. I thought before that I probably didn't fit, and the clear berth that ponies we pass are giving me speaks to that, which is just as well. Applejack's orange is brighter than I'd like, but bearable. Not so with many of these ponies. Every color of the rainbow and so few of them muted. Where there are crowds of them, I can't look for more than a few seconds without it hurting. Applejack and I arrive at the door to the gingerbread building.
Welcome to Sugar Cube Corner,
she says, pushing open the door. The instant we're inside, I look up, and standing behind a display of pastries is a new pony. This one pink. Utterly, painfully, disgustingly pink. Like I'm adjusting to a light coming on in a darkened room. I have to squint my eyes away a few times before I'm able to fix them on her for more than just a moment. And even then, there's a burning in the background.
Hi, Pinkie. This here's Paul.
The pony, Pinkie, was smiling brightly, blindingly when we came in. But it died down more and more the longer it took me to adjust. Then she winks at me. Then she keeps winking at me. Her left eye fluttering open and closed, but it doesn't look purposeful.
You're not from around here, huh?
Silence. I can't think of anything to say to that. I'd been thinking it before, of course, but to have her put it to words felt strange. Ominous, even. A few moments and Pinkie seems to catch the vibe she'd put out, worry coming over her face.
Oh, hey, no! I didn't mean it in any kind of a mean way. Sorry, that was a super bad start.
She hops over to the counter and comes up to me and Applejack. She has a plated, thick slice of cake on her hoof that I didn't see her grab.
Here, no hard, uncomfy feelings.
The cake is pink, even down to the batter, and with intricate little patterns of white frosting on top. It's almost as hard to look at as the girl holding it. But despite that, and despite the still fresh memory of the apple, my mouth is watering. The generosity is getting to me, though. That's kind of you. But I've already been given free food today. What's the normal price? Pinkie manages to somehow look cheerful, even with a frown on her face.
2 bits,
She says. It takes me a moment to place the phrase, but soon enough, I root around in my pocket and fish out a quarter, passing it to her as I take the slice of cake. I assume that she's still just being generous, but as long as I'm giving her something, I figure I won't press it. Before I manage to take a bite, Pinkie says,
what's this?
I look between the quarter and Pinkie's bewildered eyes a few times. A quarter? You know, shave and a haircut, 2 bits. 25 cents. Her face tells me that she still doesn't get it. What did you actually... But I see Applejack at my side take off her hat, reach inside it, and draw out 2 coins. 2 gold coins.
This is 2 bits, Sugar Cube.
Pinkie's still eyeing the quarter.
What's this thing even made of? Silver?
No, I say, trying not to eye their gold too much. Or not anymore, I think. Nowadays, I'm pretty sure it's nickel and copper. Pinkie drops the coin like it's a snake.
Nickel!
Applejack just gasps. What? Applejack turns to me, pupils pinpricks in those big expanses she calls eyes.
Nickel ain't exactly common, huh?
Not common! This stuff's rarer than lead! There's just a hookful of teeny tiny nickel mines in the entire world! A couple of these I could probably fund parties for a whole month!
Huh. I reach back into my pockets, into the coin spot on my wallet, wherever. Pinkie and Applejack stare with jaws dropped as I draw out a small handful of quarters, nickels, and dimes. What do you suppose I could get with this much? When they stopped staring, Applejack and I, Pinkie had to keep working, visited an appraiser that lived in the area. And then we visited a few metallurgists. And then I bought a small house. After that, I hit that part of the dream I always do. That part where I learned to live with it. Here, though, all I had to live with was a change of scenery that hurt my eyes if I stared too long. And odd looks from townspeople. Not so bad, really. If I'd been aware it was another dream, I wouldn't have yet called it a nightmare. Months went by. I subsisted on what was left over from the nickel money and odd jobs that would come up in Ponyville's newspaper. Even though I didn't realize it was all a dream, I was finding myself filled with a strange feeling of impermanence, growing stronger every day. Like I knew that my stay wouldn't last. It made me wary of picking up any lasting job. I would go into autopilot a lot, it seemed like. I still saw Applejack and Pinkie now and again. Ponyville wasn't large. Plus, I'd visit sometimes. And when I did, I'd snap back out of it for a day or two. In those times, when I had some clarity, and I was alone, I took to painting. Art always sort of interested me, I guess. No, don't know why I didn't bring it up before. Doesn't it interest everyone? Anyway, I'd paint when I was at my house and not just going through the motions. Not much furniture in the place, but loads of easels eventually. Thing was, though, that the paint was just the same as everything else. Bright, blaring. Even dark colors still had this vague, lit-up quality. Painting wasn't making the colors hurt any less, but if nothing else, it was getting me accustomed to the pain. I was near the point that I could ignore some of the less bright ones. One day, though, everything stops making sense. I wake up to the sun shining in through my window, and I blink away the hurt of it. I look around my room, and it's as dark as night. I'm thinking too slow to pick up on just what's wrong with the picture, but the question answers itself a few seconds later when, before my eyes, the room turns bright. I look out my window again. Really look. The sun is up, but it isn't alone. Houses are floating up in the sky, too. Ponies. And the sky isn't right. The sun may be high, but the sky is the color of a sunset, pinkish orange and darkening. Then, like someone flipped a switch, the sun isn't there anymore. The moon is out and the sky is an ocean green. As I open my front door and make to step out onto the street, I instinctively shift all my weight backwards, trying to throw myself back inside. My house is one of the floating ones. I stand again and peek back out. Luckily, it looks like I'm just a few feet up from the ground, unlike some of the ones I saw before that had to have been hundreds of feet up. I hop down to the cobblestones below, only to find that they're not cobblestones anymore. More a grayish, lumpy gelatin that I sink down into, up to my ankle on the left and my knee on the right. A great sucking squelch, and I managed to get myself free, resolving to step carefully. Honestly, I didn't know what to think of it all. Things had been strange for me before all this, but this felt different. A wrong kind of strangeness. It didn't fit. Even the music in my head was wrong. Sharp and ugly notes with a pattern that was hard to make out. Chaos. I decided to try and find Applejack and see if she knew what was happening. I'm seeing ponies around as I start passing closer to Ponyville's center. More and more frequently, though, their colors are muted or grayish. At first I was relieved that looking at them didn't strain me, but then I started to notice their faces. No one was happy. In the months before, even if I rarely interacted with anyone I wasn't working for, I could still look out my window and see smiling faces, hear laughter, and cheerful conversation. It was like even if I wasn't feeling fully in tune with everything, I could still leech off a bit of happiness off of everyone else. I could see that happiness existed. And it was nice. Now, though, ponies look frightened, or angry, or even just blank. They'd run away from me, or heedlessly past me, or around in circles. They'd kick and scream and yell at one another. One boy was just sitting by the side of the road, staring up at the sky, and wailing his heart out at nothing I could see. It's wrong. All of it. The thought crosses my mind that I bring all the color back to them in a heartbeat if I could. All the pain. If they would just go back to normal. Seemingly out of nowhere, I hear an explosion. It might have come from the center of the town, and while I feel a bit worried about getting hurt, I'm more worried about that Applejack or Pinkie might be there. I make my way to the town square as fast as I can. As I make it past the last building and onto the square, I see my fears realized. Applejack and Pinkie are here, along with a number of friends of theirs that I'd sometimes seen them with in town. Also, here's a thing my brain labeled monster, and behind him, a smoking crater that must have come from the explosion. This time, my eyes are agreeing with my brain. There's no other word but monster for this thing. A collection of parts from too many different animals, all thrown together. There's a dark sneer on his face, victorious looking. I know immediately that he's the cause of all this. Just looking at him. Just looking. I'm getting that same weird dissonant feeling as from the apple and everything else. But stronger than ever. This sense that there's more to him than I'm seeing. Something past him, or in him, that I couldn't hope to understand. The thing was, though, that his something is different from the apples, or the who's, or the breezes, or any of the other things I touched, or smelled, or tasted in my time in the dream since. His something comes from someplace else, and it doesn't fit. But now, something's happening. Applejack and Pinkie and the rest are glowing, and points of light are shooting from them out towards the monster. The glowing ramps up, and even at the edge of the square, I'm feeling wind rush out from them. Or maybe just pure force. The six of them start floating in midair, and the lights coming from them concentrate into one big mass. A rainbow that flies out from them at the monster. That rainbow. It's the brightest thing I've seen since I woke up in the field. Brighter than the sky, and the apple, and the crowds of ponies. The colors that make it up are so pure and saturated that I think it might drive me blind. But then I realize, it doesn't hurt. It feels good, looking on at it. It grows and expands out across everything I can see, past all of the buildings in the square and further out. It's warm, and it's safe, and it feels right. The force coming off of the six ponies is too much for me to handle, and I fall to the ground. Just as quickly, though, I feel it end. I open my eyes, and far above is a cloudless sky, as blue as it always should be. And it doesn't hurt to look. By the end of the next day, everything in town seemed pretty much back to normal, oddly enough. I got the impression that things like that monster weren't too uncommon an occurrence here, but this one might have been somewhat worse than normal. Apparently, though, whenever one of these fiascos is over and done with, and after any damage is recovered from, Ponyville pulls together for a great big celebration. Pinkie told me in no uncertain terms that I was invited whether I liked it or not. Thankfully, I like the idea just fine. Right as the sun disappears over the horizon, there's an explosion of noise and color in the town square. The gathered crowd is roiling, cheers going up into the warm night air. And none of it hurts. Even with this mass of brightly colored people talking in bright voices about bright things, I can stand to be here. More than that, being here is fun. I hear Pinkie's voice over all the chattering and the music, saying,
You came!
I turn around and find her, with Applejack and their 4 friends grouped up, and talking amongst themselves not too far behind. Hey Pinkie, I say, smiling. Happy to be here. Pinkie's eye twitches, like most times I see her. It's her right eye, though. It's always been her left before, like when I first met her. The smile she had on at first slowly disappears, and it's a storm of introductions, each of them telling me who they are and what they do. I don't think I even remember what most of their names were, but all of them seem nice enough. So, I say after a break in the conversation, what exactly was that you all did yesterday? That light. The purple friend, who might be named Twilight, and who might also be a bit tipsy, says too loudly,
The light of friendship!
The rest of them giggle, and I let out a chuckle myself. The white friend with a really easy name, Rarity, says to me,
I suppose she's right in a way. Yup, all of us have been able to do that since we started being friends.
says Applejack. She stares down into her mug, smiling.
Always comes in handy when there's some big bad beastie we can't get rid of the normal way.
The rainbow-haired friend, who I'm very thankful I never saw up close before the color stopped hurting, pumped her hoof into the air.
Right, then it's wham! We throw the friendship right in their face.
Another few giggles. Well, it was impressive. I'm really grateful for it. Thank you. I heard myself say it really empathetically, but I wasn't quite sure why. The group of them stopped giggling, apart from Twilight, and look at me. Rarity says,
Well, you're welcome, darling, but we did it for the town.
Yeah,
says the rainbow one, looking a little embarrassed.
why'd that sound so personal, big guy?
I didn't have an answer. I felt incredibly grateful to them and what they did. But,
I get it.
says Pinkie. We all turn to her, and she looks to me.
I think we helped you fit.
They didn't get it, and I didn't fully get it in the dream either. But the night went on, and I had a lot of fun, and we all said our goodbyes when the sun started coming up. Pinkie's felt a lot more final than the others, and more heartfelt. Not long after that, I went to sleep in the dream, and I woke up in bed back home, and it was morning.
That same sound for a few long moments of a pen tapping on a pad,
Thank you for sharing it, Paul.
says the therapist.
But I'm afraid I'm not sure what you'd like me to take from it. It was certainly an interesting sounding dream, at least.
Paul, a smile on his face, sits up higher in his cushy chair.
I don't know what to take from it myself, if I'm honest. It feels important to me. Or like it will be.
A slight smile finds its way onto the woman's lips as well.
It's certainly good to see you so enthusiastic. If you don't mind me asking, though, how do you think the dream might be important?
I don't know yet,
Paul glances out of the window at the daylight.
but I know I'll figure it all out.
Rubber soles clapping on tile floors. White walls. Fluorescent lighting. Hallways stretching past big open rooms. Voices here and silence there, but always busy movement. On the wall, hanging still, a square of blue. Next to it, a square of green. Next, red. Then pink. Then white, brighter even than the walls. And past them, a room filled with more colors still. sometimes the same colours again, but with brighter paints, or backlit, or rendered in glass and searing neon. Installations of wood and paint and dye and metal, all of them bright and colourful. And in the back, a final square. More voices around this one than the rest. A small plate on the wall beside reads, "That Something Beyond," by Paul Matthews.